What's up, guys, and welcome to week number 5 of Mild vs. the Movies. This is the 5th week of me watching a movie a day, every day, for the entire calendar year. So we're going to jump straight in this episode. There's no business to deal with. So we're going to jump into our first movie. The first film I watched this week was You Were Never Really Here, which I watched on Amazon Prime, directed by Lynn Ramsey from 2017. For our plot summary, Joe is a troubled man who finds missing girls and disposes of their kidnappers. We follow him as his psyche unravels as he is dragged into a dark conspiracy. On to my pros for this movie. Firstly, Joaquin Phoenix's performance is very, very good. It's very impressive, it's very immersive, and it's a really good character he's playing. Joe feels very much like a real person, even though what he's doing would be quite outlandish if he didn't execute it well. Joe feels completely believable, and he's quite sympathetic, even though he's going around murdering people. Even though the people he murders are bad people, he's still a murderer, you know? So to make a character like that quite sympathetic shows the strength of his performance in this. He is very, very good in this. Particularly portraying his sort of descent into a darker and darker place as we go through the movie. So for my second pro, I've got the amazing cinematography and direction down for this movie. This movie looks amazing. The way things are filmed is good. The way, well, I'll give a particular example I like. There's an underwater section at one point, that's really good. But the main thing I'm going to bring up, and I think it's the thing everybody brings up about this movie, any critic that talks about it, so I'm not going to spoil it too much, because I think it's better for you to see it. There's a couple of home invasion sequences in this movie, where we follow Joe as he's going into a location, and the way they're all filmed is a particular highlight. They are filmed really well, they're presented in a way I've never really seen before, and it really adds a lot to like the message of the film. They're very well done. For my next pro, I think the score is really great. I like how it matches the tone of what's going on in the scene. Now that's the case with most scores, well, any good score. But in this case, it's more, it matches the tone of, not so much the tone, but the mental state of Joe as we're watching this. So when he's having his normal day-to-day life, like going to the shops or whatever, it's just kind of normal music. And then when he's doing his work, going out and dealing with people, it becomes a lot more frantic and a lot more loud and jarring and weird instruments coming out of nowhere and just strange notes. It's very, very good because it makes you feel like you're in his head. For my last pro, I really like how violence is kind of displayed in this movie. It's displayed in like a really unglamorous way. It's quite restrained as well, given what happens. You don't really see much, but that's for the better. I think it's what the movie's going for as a whole, but it really adds a lot and I really enjoyed it. On to my cons now. I have one it's probably too dark for a lot of people, not in terms of lighting, in terms of story. What this movie's about and what it kind of touches on is something that a lot of people would be quite uncomfortable with. I think that's why it probably doesn't have wider acclaim, is because of how dark it is. So it's definitely not for everyone's taste. For my overall rating though, I gave this film a 9 out of 10. Do I think you should see it? Maybe. Like I mentioned in my cons, it probably is too dark for most audiences. If you look into it more and you think you fancy it and you don't mind films that have got quite upsetting elements to them, then by all means give it a watch and you'll probably enjoy it. It is a very well made movie and it's a very good movie. So on the 28th of January, I watched R.I.P.D. on DVD, directed by Robert Schwentke? I'm not sure how that's pronounced. From 2013. For our plot summary, we follow a recently deceased Boston police officer as he adjusts to the afterlife of working for the R.I.P.D, which is the Rest in Peace Department. Yeah, I get it. With his new partner, Cowboy Man, played by Kurt Russell. I can't remember his name in the movie. He's just Cool Cowboy in my head. Well, Cool Cowboy Kurt Russell, which is quite a cool character. Going on to my pros now. I thought it was a very fun and enjoyable watch. It's quite a blockbustery genre movie, so it's quite easy to watch. It's not very... You don't have to think much while watching this movie. It's just quite a fun, relaxing kind of ride. I think it's the perfect thing to follow You Were Never Really Here, because that is an intense movie. This is just kind of like a fun old time. For my second pro, Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's a pro in anything he shows up in. I'm like, Kurt Russell, big letters. But he is very entertaining in this movie. You can tell he's like, I get to play the most outlandish Western cowboy policeman I can be. And he is enjoying every part of it. He is like, kinda over the top. Probably a bit too over the top, maybe. But I don't mind that. I quite like people when they're over the top in movies. But he's all like, oh, this goddamn coyote and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, he's like a crazy cowboy guy. I'm into this. So he's very, very entertaining in this movie. Probably the reason I enjoyed it so much, to be honest. He carries this movie a lot. Thirdly, sort of tying into what I was saying about Kurt Russell, I think the movie's pretty funny. Like, not necessarily like gut-bustingly laugh out loud funny, but you know, it's an enjoyable experience. It's quite humorous at times. It's not like in my list of the funniest films ever made, but it's not terrible either. On to my next pro. I thought the wormhole CGI was really good. Now, it's a bit spoilery, but at a certain point you get this kind of like wormhole effect going on. Those are really cool. That's like really well done CGI. Even for this movie being, 6 years old now? So they're still really impressive. And for my last pro, and I think this is why I kind of liked it quite a bit, it's really similar to the movie Men in Black. Now, I don't know if that's... I think it's intentional. I feel as if it's a bit like the elevator pitch for it. You know, the it's blank meets blank. You know, that kind of pitch it was like Men in Black but ghosts. Because you've got the new rookie person, which is Ryan Reynolds, and you've got the grizzled veteran, which is, you know, the Tommy Lee Jones character, and they don't get on to begin with, and then over time they develop a mutual respect for each other. You know, it's kind of like Men in Black in a lot of ways. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's quite a good thing, because if you're going to emulate something that people like. But I can understand maybe some people might view it as a criticism. I view it as a good thing, because Men in Black's a good movie. And it's not, you know, it's not like egregiously ripping off Men in Black. It's not like there's like a bit where he gets like a gun that's like really small and then he shoots it and it's really powerful or something like that. It has its own things going on. It just is quite similar, like tonally. Onto my cons for this movie, I'll say this: the CGI for the monster people is awful. Even for the time, it was bad. And now it looks really bad. It's quite bizarre, so because like I said, the wormhole effects are really good, but the people are... Ooh. I think that's where a lot of the criticism lies. Those CGI, like, monster people are really bad. If you watch it, you'll see exactly what I mean. But yeah, it's not exactly the best. So for my overall rating, I gave this movie a 7 out of 10. I quite enjoyed it. It's quite an enjoyable, like, little film. I don't think many critics liked it, looking at the Metascore. It was a 25 out of 100. I wonder how much of that is about the CGI, because that's pretty bad. It's a shame, really, because, like, if you could take the raw footage and, you know, redo the CG, it would be a really good movie. But the CG really does let it down. Do I think you should watch it? Yeah, probably. The CG might put you off, because like I said, it's really bad, and it's so strange to me, because none of the other CG is bad. Just the people are bad. It's like it was made by a separate team. I don't know if it was, but it's just really strange to me. So for my next film, I watched Monster on Amazon Prime, directed by Patty Jenkins from 2003. Definitely getting my Amazon Prime money's worth this week. For our plot summary, we follow Eileen I believe it's pronounced, a prostitute who ends up as a serial killer as she attempts to earn money for her and her girlfriend, played by Christina Ricci. For my pros for this movie, firstly I'll say Charlize Theron's performance. Now, if you know anything about this movie, you probably know it for Charlize Theron. She is incredible in it. I looked up some trivia for this movie. To play this part, she gained 30 pounds, shaved off her eyebrows, and had to wear false teeth in every single scene. The transformation from Charlize Theron to Charlize Theron in this movie is genuinely impressive, and her performance is good. She's quite manic, she's quite threatening, but she's also sympathetic at the same time. She does a really good job in this movie. Not that that's like a big revelation to anyone, but she is amazing in this movie. For my next pro, kind of tying into the way she's like made up, with her hair and like her face. I don't know what they did to her. She looks rough. She looks like someone who's not exactly having a good life. Like she is in the movie. She's homeless in the movie. You know, she's not. You know, it's done really well. Thirdly, I thought the soundtrack was quite good at times. I quite liked. It had a lot of pop songs in it, which is always something I've always enjoyed in a movie. I like any movie that has actual music in it as well as score. To be honest, I probably prefer a score a lot of the time. I think people are now getting a bit too much like, well, Quentin Tarantino uses music from everything, so I can do that too. Guardians of the Galaxy did it, so we can do it. And then you make Suicide Squad. It's a dangerous path. You start off, you're just trying to make Quentin Tarantino movie, and before you know it, you made Suicide Squad. You don't want to be that person, do you? On to my cons now. I'm not particularly keen on the sympathetic tone it takes towards Eileen, the serial killer in it, because it kind of portrays it as every man she killed deserved it in some way. Or at least the early ones do, and then like the last couple less so. But like the men all kind of deserved it, and she's like perfect because she's had like a hard life in that. I like having shades of grey in a movie. I like, oh, you think this serial killer is bad, but actually something horrible happened to them, and that's kind of why they're the way they are, or they've got something wrong with them, or that. That's good. You can do that in a movie. I just think this movie goes, instead of it being, it goes too far the opposite direction, if you get what I mean. So like, instead of it being killer bad, victims good, instead of them being shades of grey, oh, some, do they deserve it, do they not? It then kind of sits you down and goes, no, she's good. She's a good serial killer. All the men she killed deserved it. And you're kind of like, ugh, that's not... She's also a real person. Those are real people she killed, It's a bit, ugh. It's not something I particularly... It didn't sit right with me. I think it kind of put me off the movie a bit. Secondly, I'm not keen on Christina Ricci's character or her performance in it. She's kind of crap. I don't know if it's just because Charlize Theron is so good that when you compare anyone else to her, they look bad. But Christina Ricci is like just annoying and kind of unlikable the whole movie. And I think she's meant to be likable, and I don't particularly like her in it. Thirdly, I don't think there's much going on in the movie outside of Charlize Theron's performance. Like, the subplots are not interesting, the actual story itself isn't really that interesting. There's a lot in it where I'm just like, I'll just sort of wrap this up and I'll explain what I mean when I'm talking about whether I think you should watch it or not. So for my overall rating for this film, gave it a 7 out of 10. Do I think you should watch it? I'm not really sure how to answer that. Because you should watch it to see Charlize Theron's performance. But the movie itself isn't good. Like, I didn't particularly like this movie. But I didn't dislike it, to be honest. I thought it was kind of alright. But Charlize Theron is so good, it kind of drags it up, you know what I mean? So, like, if this movie had just been the quality it was, and then Charlize Theron's character was someone else, and didn't put in nearly as much effort as she did in the movie, it'd probably be like a 5 out of 10. That's why I don't really know what to say whether I think you should watch it or not. Maybe if you want to see Charlize Theron act well, but I don't think I would recommend just going out and watching it. So for my next film, I watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind on DVD from 1977, directed by Steven Spielberg. I've not heard of him. Must have been some obscure director from the past. I don't know. For our plot summary, we follow Roy Neary, an electrician, who, while responding to a power outage, sees a UFO. Ooh. And then his whole life is kind of turned upside down in the aftermath. Onto the pros, visual effects are pretty good. The version I was watching was a 30th anniversary re-release where I think they redid all the effects. So I don't know if the version I was watching had significantly better effects than the original, but the effects were pretty good. I quite liked them. They're quite bright, quite colourful, which is quite nice. I quite liked them. For my second pro, I thought the score was very good. It's very iconic, of course, the 5 notes that dun 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 that ties into the plot. But I really liked it. It adds quite a lot. It's quite atmospheric. It's a good score. For my next pro, I particularly liked a certain sequence in the movie where Richard DeFrace, Roy, is in his truck where he has the close encounter with the UFO. That's filmed really well. Like, all the stuff starts flying to the ceiling of the truck. There's lights, there's noise, there's just like all kinds of scary crap, so you don't know what's going on. And that's really well done, because it's like, I don't know. Well, obviously, I was going to say no one knows, but some people claim they know. But no one's had a close encounter with an alien like that. And I imagine it would be pretty scary. And it does quite a good job of making like this big scary event going off. For my last pro, I liked a lot of the ideas in certain sections. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but certain ideas the movie brings up, like Roy is almost kind of obsessed with the UFO after he sees them. The stuff like that I really like, and it's got a lot of good ideas, the movie. But let's get into the cons. Firstly, this movie is too long. It's 2 hours and 18 minutes, and it feels a lot longer. It was very, very long. And tying into that, secondly for my cons, is kind of boring. I was surprised. I thought Steven Spielberg alien movie, that'll probably be quite interesting. No, it's quite boring. It just feels like at times not a lot is happening. Thirdly, you've got the unlikable family that Roy's a part of. And they're kind of unlikable before the UFO encounter. So you're just kind of... These people are just jerks. Like, the kids are jerks. They're all shouting at each other all the time, constantly. It's just not an enjoyable experience, because you're like, I don't want to get shouted at by a bunch of people when I'm watching my movie. I just want to watch my movie. I don't want to get shouted at. And for another con, I dislike the ending of the movie. It kind of acts like it's a happy ending, but it's one of those endings where you go, but what about? I'm not going to explain what I necessarily mean, because that's spoilers and I don't really do them. But if you watch it, there's just something about it where I'm like, that's not cool. For my overall rating for this movie, I gave it a 6 out of 10. Do I think you should see it? No. Honestly, don't think you should. I was quite disappointed when I watched it, because I thought, oh, Steven Spielberg, he makes the good movies. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, guess he had a week off. It just wasn't that interesting. For my next film that I watched on the 31st of January, I watched The Other Side of the Wind on Netflix, directed by Orson Welles from 2018. For a plot summary, we follow an aging director as he shows his most recent film at a screening at his 70th birthday party. Before I jump into the pros, for those of you that don't know about this movie, and you're wondering how did Orson Welles direct a movie in 2018, this is the film that Orson Welles was mostly working on before he died. It was filmed in the 70s, over the course of about 5 years, I think. Most of the footage is filmed. He never completed it in his lifetime, and they've taken the 100 hours plus of raw footage and edited it into a 2-hour movie. I don't think 100 hours of footage, that's a lot, but I'll explain how there is 100 hours, even though the movie obviously is only 2 hours and 2 minutes long. So for my pros, firstly, I really like the film within a film. So in the film there are kind of two narratives, both of which are called The Other Side of the Wind. There's the story about the director and having his birthday party, and he's screening his new film, which is called The Other Side of the Wind. Now in the film The Other Side of the Wind is kind of a parody of like art house cinema, and it's kind of great. It's not like a parody, more like a pastiche, maybe. But it's kind of great. It's like vague and confusing, and the characters don't really know what's going on. No one really understands it in the movie, in the movie, not the movie within the movie. And that's really clever and really well done, and I really like it. It's really well executed, it's really well filmed. For my second pro, I really like the presentation of this movie. When they're watching the film within the film, all of that footage that we watch as well is in widescreen, like a proper motion picture, proper like color coded and really nicely filmed. When we are in the party for Jake Hannaford, that's the director, when we're at his party, I had to look up his name because I wanted to say Orson Welles the first time I said it, or John Huston, who's the guy who played him, and I couldn't mind the character's name, but Jake Hannaford, when we're at his 70th birthday party, all of that footage is in 4:3. A lot of it's in black and white, some of it's in colour. It really does a good job of emulating the style of it's been pieced together from lots of different footage, whereas the actual film is a proper film. It gets a bit confusing talking about films within films and narratives, especially when they both have the same title. For my third pro, I think the story is really interesting. Like the idea of like an aging director, he was like the big thing and now he's kind of not anymore, and he's trying to get the money to make his big comeback picture, which is The Other Side of the Wind, and he's the money to finish it, and he's got like a pupil that he's, well, not like a pupil, like what's the phrase I'm looking for, like a protege, there we go. He's got a protege who's gone on to bigger things, has made successful pictures, and there's kind of like a bit of a jealousy thing going on there. There's a bit like a masculine tension going on. It's very, very good. It's a very good movie. For my next pro, there's a lot of very interesting meta-narrative going on in this movie. Now, Orson Welles was like, it's not autobiographical. It is. It's not like 100% autobiographical, but it's autobiographical. The main character is Orson Welles. The character of Brooks Otterlake, who is the protege of Jake Hannaford, is played by Peter Bogdanovich, and is based on Peter Bogdanovich. So he's basically playing himself, which is very strange. He wasn't originally meant to play it. That comes into the documentary, which you should watch, which I'll be talking about next. But this whole movie's like meta-narrative, because like the reason Orson Welles never finished this movie, he didn't have enough money. Just like the director in the movie. It's the last movie he made. Just like the director in the movie died before he could finish it. Just like the director in the movie. The whole thing is like, this is like genius, this movie. I love this. For my next pro, I think this movie is massively ahead of its time. The documentary style presentation of the real life parts, if you will, with Jake Hannaford at his birthday party, it's presented as, so like we see the cameras that are filming and we'll cut between them quite rapidly, as if someone has taken all this raw footage and assembled it together to try and make a movie covering everything that happens on that last day of his life. This is the last day of his life, and you find it out right at the beginning. That's not a spoiler, by the way. Literally, opening sentence, we find out he dies that day. So it's like, we're seeing all this footage that's been shot by all these interview crews here to talk to him, about his interesting life, and that all of that being assembled together to make an actual movie. And I don't know when the first mockumentary was made, or it's not really a mockumentary. I was supposed to say mockumentary with comedy. I don't know if it can apply to just any documentary that's not real, for want of a better word. That's like a drama. So it's maybe a docudrama, but then this isn't a real narrative at all. I don't know. But I don't think I've ever seen that in a movie this old. Like, this is really ahead of its time in a lot of ways. And for my next pro, this kind of ties into what I was saying earlier, but I really like the themes of the movie, like kind of conflict between mentors and proteges when one outgrows the other. There's a lot of like things about masculinity, like what's it really like to be a man and stuff like that. This movie's got a lot going on that I really liked. It's got like the points of making fun of, like, not making fun of necessarily, but kind of having a go at like those overly pretentious films. So we're on to the cons now. I think it can be a bit confusing at the beginning until you sort of get into it. The way things are presented, it's quite unlike any movies I've seen. There are a lot of cuts in this movie where it's like bam, 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 bam. Because I don't know if it might be a bit overboard, but it feels like, so like, for example, you'll be in a car, for example, and there will be 3 cameras in the car being held by characters in the car, and we'll cut between all 3 viewpoints as we're talking. And it can maybe be a bit over the top at times. Like, sometimes you didn't have to see all 3 camera angles, in this one scene. And I think that can kind of confuse people a bit. And the opening's a bit strange, where they're all heading to his party. It doesn't really establish itself necessarily the best. Maybe I think he still wanted to shoot stuff for it, if I'm right. So maybe he wanted to film stuff at the beginning of the movie. I don't know that. Maybe he did. For my next con, I think the dialogue can be a bit hard to hear at times. Now, normally when I watch a movie, I watch it on my PS4 and I watch it with my headphones plugged in because my hearing's not too great. I don't know if it's because I wasn't listening to it like that. I was just sitting watching it on the television. I don't know if it's because of that, but at times I think it's because there's a lot of noise going on because there's a party. So there's lots of people like, oh, blah, 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 blah. In the background while you're like trying to hear someone have an argument about the merits of religion or something like that. I don't know if that's just what distracted me and it kind of made it harder for me to hear. But I found the problem not so bad as it went on, so maybe it's just the earlier footage, the audio quality's not been held up so well. For my last con, I do think at times it's maybe a little bit too pretentious. Like, some of the dialogue is a bit meh. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but there's some lines that people deliver where I'm like, that's a bit, I don't know how to quite word it. Like it was written and it sounded good, but it doesn't come across as something that anyone would actually say. Well, to be honest, Orson Welles, he probably would say something like that because he's quite an intelligent man. So my overall rating for this movie is it's an 8 out of 10. Do I think we should see it? Yeah, probably. I think it's kind of a mess in some ways, with the way it's all edited quite frantically. But I kind of liked that, but I could understand people not liking it at all at the same time. I liked it. It's not for everyone. If you fancy it, I think you should give it a try. It's definitely worth seeing just because of the spectacle of it. This film took 40 years to make. Well, I say 40 years, it took 5 years to make and then 35 years to edit. That's more than 35 years, isn't it? I don't know, it took a long time to edit. It's quite something. Following on from that, I watched They'll Love Me When I'm Dead on Netflix, directed by Morgan Neville from 2018. For a plot summary, in this documentary, we follow Orson Welles' work as he attempts to complete The Other Side of the Wind, his grand comeback picture. You can see what I mean about the meta-narrative already, can't you? So, for the pros of this movie, I thought it was a very interesting subject. I'm always, very interested in films and how they're made, and Orson Welles is an incredibly interesting person. And he makes a very good documentary subject. Because he's, an interesting guy, he's got a great speaking voice, he says interesting things. So it's a very interesting documentary. Interesting. I don't think I've said it enough, but it's very interesting. For my next pro, I thought some of the presentation was really fun in it. So we get scenes intercutting with each other where we'll have someone in one of the interview segments talking, then we'll have Orson Welles cut to like Orson Welles in like a program saying like the next sentence to lead into what they say next. So instead of hearing like the production assistant going, "Oh, why would you say that?" You get Orson Welles in a movie going, "Why would you say that?" And there's Orson Welles' voice. I wish I could do Orson Welles' voice. It's so great. Why wouldn't you speak in that voice all the time if you could? I also like, as well, tying into that, all of the interviews in this are in black and white, and all like the new footage is in black and white. And most of the archive stuff, obviously not all of it, but most of the archive stuff is in colour, which is quite a fun little comparison. I quite like that. Thirdly, I really enjoyed having Alan Cumming as our narrator in this documentary. I really like Alan Cumming. He does a good job in it. He's got a lovely voice. And he just does a really good job of narrating this. And sort of presenting it as well, because he is on camera, rather than just voiceover. For my cons, maybe a bit depressing, given the subject in particular and the what happens at the end of the story. Like, I hate to break it to you, for those of you who don't know, Orson Welles never finished The Other Side of the Wind. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's kind of got like an element of tragedy to it, which is good, but also kind of makes me sad. And for my other con, this is probably done for a stylistic purpose, but I'm still not keen on it. There aren't any nameplates in this movie, so you know how normally we'll go to a person being interviewed in a documentary and it'll come up on screen, oh, Barry Stevens person. You know, it'll come up with whoever they are. But usually it'll just come up with their name, or in certain cases, like, for example, we talked to Orson Welles' daughter is in this. It'll come up with her name and then Orson Welles' daughter underneath. We don't have any of those in this movie, and it can be a bit hard to know who is who and who's talking at times. Just because I like knowing who's saying what in these kind of things, because obviously some people are going to have biased opinions on certain things. Like Rich Little, for example, isn't going to say Orson Welles fired me because he thought I was a crap actor. Whereas Peter Bogdanovich is going to say Orson Welles hired me to take Rich Little's part because Rich Little was a crap actor. You know? But no, that was a bit of illegal stuff, wasn't it? Oh no, there's a bit in this where they're like, we can't say too much legally. Was that, or was that the bit about the Shah of Iran? No, it was the Spanish guy who invested some of the money. I'm okay, I'm not going to get sued by Rich Little. Whew, that's a relief. I was like, oh no, I'm going to be in court. Getting back on track, I do like having something to identify who's talking. Just my personal preference, but I feel like it would have added to the movie. Overall, I gave this an 8 out of 10. I think this is a really good documentary. If you're going to watch Other Side of the Wind, watch this as well. I don't know what one you should watch first. Weirdly, because I watched them in this order because I thought maybe They'll Love Me When I'm Dead spoils The Other Side of the Wind, but it doesn't. At least I don't remember it doing. Obviously you see footage from the movie in it, but I would you would maybe like The Other Side of the Wind more if you watched the documentary first and saw all the meta-narrative stuff kind of laid out, and then you watch the movie. To be honest, maybe the perfect way to do it is to watch The Other Side of the Wind, They'll Love Me When I'm Dead, and then The Other Side of the Wind again. So like you watch it kind of blind, you watch this documentary, and then you watch it again with the perspective of knowing who kind of represents who and what's really going on kind of behind the scenes. You maybe get an entirely different appreciation of the movie. Oh, I might do that actually. I might watch The Other Side of the Wind again. On to my last movie this week, which I watched on Groundhog Day, February the 2nd, which was Titanic 2, the sequel to James Cameron's Titanic, directed by James Cameron, of course. Just kidding. It was directed by Shane Van Dyke. I watched it on Amazon Prime, so you can all watch it now if you're a Prime subscriber. And it's from 2010, made by The Asylum, just to give you an idea of the quality we're going to have before we jump into this. So, for our plot summary, 100 years after the original, a second Titanic. God, just even reading this, I'm like, my word. A second Titanic crosses from New York to Southampton in the UK, only to fall victim to an iceberg and mega tsunamis. Dun dun dun. So for my solitary pro for Titanic 2, I have that this is a laughably bad movie. I laughed a few times at this movie. It didn't make me angry like some of the bad movies have. I laughed at this. Not with it, at it, just to clarify. On to the cons now. We're already there. Firstly, we've got the terrible CGI. This is really the level of a subpar PS2 game. Yes, really, it is that bad. It's not quite polygonal. It's not got like polygons sticking out. It's not like a PS1 game. But it is a budget PS2 game quality of graphics. And this film came out after Megafault, and that had better CG in it. I don't know what happened in the year in between. Maybe the graphic designer went home. Maybe they got a new graphic designer. Like the guy who made the Megafault fell into a Megafault, ironically. That's what got him, and was a Megafault. If only he'd been known. So yeah, the CG's awful. In particular, a big shout out to when the ship sets off from New York. And so it's a photo of the New York docks. Okay, docks at New York. Picture that. Picture that in your mind. And then boat.png moves in a straight line across the screen. And that's the boat setting sail. No smoke coming out of the smokestacks. Nothing like that at all. Just slowly moves along. It's kind of hilarious. For my next con, I've got the terrible acting. In particular, lead girl. Now, I'm not going to bother trying to remember what these characters were called, because, like a lot of these movies, I can remember one, actually. A lot of these movies have this problem, and it'll be, okay, so we need to establish in the movie that this character's called Claire, for example. So it'll be like, oh, hello, I'm Claire. And then they'll dump about 20 more plot points all in that one scene. So I'll be like, I'm Claire. This is also where we'll establish why Titanic 2 is going to crash later in the movie. And that's a lot of information taken at once, so the name kind of gets pushed to the side and your brain goes, you need the information about how the mega tsunami will happen. But yeah, lead girl. Back on track. Lead girl. Her acting is terrible. So at one point, her best friend, again, spoilers throughout this one, because who cares about Titanic 2? Lead girl in Titanic 2, she sees her best friend get her spine crushed and killed by a giant metal door. So your best friend just dies in front of you. Now, I will now recreate her acting, her reacting to this death. Kelly! No. That was possibly too good. Oh, it's atrocious. It's one of the worst bits of acting I've seen. I was like, that's your best friend? She just got, like, her spine broken. And she's just like, no. Oh, man, it is. Like I said, this one's more of a... It's not bad, so bad it's good, because it's still just bad. But it's more entertaining than a lot of the ones I've watched so far. Speaking of terrible acting, I forgot to write him down, but the captain in this movie is also really bad. There's also a submarine captain at one point. I don't know why it's exclusively captains or bad actors in this movie. submarine captain, like, kind of messes up a line and it's in the movie. So there's a bit where he's like, we need to dive now to avoid the icebergs. And his second in command is starting to go, but sir, we can't do that. And the guy goes like that and just do it. He tells the guy to do it before the guy has made clear that's what he's going to say. You know, he reacts before the thing he reacts to, and that's in the movie. You know, you could have filmed it again. But to be honest, we see like approximately a minute of inside the submarine footage. So maybe they had the submarine set for a day. I think a lot of the set things in the Asylum movies are, we had the submarine set for the day, so that means all the submarine scenes must be completed. Like, we had the helicopter exterior for the day, all helicopter exterior scenes must be completed. That's the kind of impression I get. Next con, the terrible plot. So first of all, we've got the mega tsunami. I'll deal with that first. So, what happens is Titanic 2, it's sailing along on its merry way. Toot toot, I'm Titanic. Titanic 2, here I come. Toot, 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 like that. And what happens is, because of global warming, a giant glacier in Greenland is breaking apart. And the chunks of ice are coming off it, creating icebergs that are also causing tsunamis. And it's just kind of dumb. Like, one of our characters in particular, so we've got main character girl. Her dad is also the head of the Coast Guard, because of course he is. He goes to see the glacier where this, big bit's about to collapse, where it's a bit the size of Rhode Island. A chunk of ice the size of Rhode Island is going to fall in the sea at once. Him and the iceberg scientist lady are standing on the ice right next to the bit that broke off, okay? And then you hear the ice cracking. Obviously the ice cracking. You know that noise that's in every movie. And I'm not joking, they stand there for 2 minutes. And then he goes, "What's that?" And then she looks around and then goes, "Run!" And you're like, I'm not being funny. You just spent 3 minutes talking about what will happen and how this ice is about to break at any second, and then we're surprised when the ice broke. It's a really dumb movie. Tying into that, we also have, while they're in this ice, on this glacier in Greenland, so in the Arctic Circle, ice cold, so when they land, he puts on a parka jacket, and that's it. No gloves. The lady working there is wearing jeans and trainers, and she's working in the Arctic, basically. And you're like, what is this movie? She doesn't have any gloves on. She's working in the Arctic snow. You're like, what are you doing, movie? Could you not have got her a pair of gloves? She probably owns gloves. You could have said, could you bring in a pair of gloves for Titanic 2? Oh man. Speaking of terrible plot, this is more of a plot hole than anything. So they're like, don't worry, the ship has ice detectors on it, and it'll detect any iceberg within 300 yards of the ship. So when the iceberg hits the ship, it's going at super fast speed, so those ice detectors won't do you any good, because it's being pushed by the tsunami, you see. The ice detectors don't go off and are never mentioned after the one scene that they're mentioned in. So it's like an iceberg hits the side of the ship and the ice detector never goes off. Right, you bought a shoddy ship, Mr. Shipman. We're getting on to Mr. Shipman soon. In fact, oh no, it's the next point. This whole movie is an ego trip for the director. So Shane Van Dyke also stars in this movie as the owner of Titanic 2. As a wealthy billionaire, he lands in a helicopter on the Titanic 2 and is escorted for the first 20 minutes in every scene before the disaster starts by 3/4 attractive ladies. Well, attractive ladies, I think they were meant to be in his mind it was supermodels, and in real life it's just women. But because he's so handsome. And main character's friend called Kelly, who's the only character whose name I can remember, because we'll get into that later why I can remember it. She sees him while they're not on the ship. She sees him on the top of the ship in having got out the helicopter, and friend is instantly like, oh, he's so handsome. And you're like, my god, the director wrote that part for himself. And I'm going to get into something a bit strange now. I think that Shane Van Dyke... This is my conspiracy theory, by the way. I have a conspiracy theory about this movie, and you're about to get it dropped on you. Shane Van Dyke auditioned to be Jack in the movie Titanic by James Cameron. Okay? Shane Van Dyke would have been 18 in 1997, about the right age. If you look at Shane Van Dyke, look up a picture of him, imagine him as a teenager, you would describe him physically exactly the same way you would describe Leonardo DiCaprio in 1997. Long blonde hair, well, medium length blonde hair, young, white, male actor. I am, 80% certain that he auditioned for that, didn't get it, so then I was just thinking about this. Then 13 years later, he makes Titanic 2 and casts himself as the male lead, who falls in love with a person, well, that he already knew, so it's slightly different to the movie. It's a completely different story, guys. Casts himself as the male lead, heroically sacrifices himself so the girl can live. Does that sound familiar to anyone at all? Maybe? Just a little bit? This movie feels like the whole reason for it existing is, first of all, the director to be like, I'm great. And secondly, for him to go, I'll show James Cameron what he's missing out on. I'll do the best drown acting that he's ever seen. I mean, to be fair, when he is underwater, because there are actually underwater shots in this movie, I was amazed. I thought there's no way there's going to be water in this movie. And it's not like out a hose. When there's actual water scenes in this movie, when he's in them, he does a really good drowned. You know, where he's lying, you know, like floating, like he's dead. He does a really good job of that. It's possibly the worst compliment I've ever given someone. He does a really good job of being dead. I genuinely do think that he made this film as a attempt to show James Cameron that he missed out. And yeah, I don't think he did. Moving on to my next con now. Something I lightly touched on earlier. The friend and the main character, I couldn't tell them apart, basically. So they're both blonde, they're both women, obviously. They're both, well, not obviously, but just to make clear how confusing it is, they have similar hairstyles. They are both wearing identical uniforms because they work in the ship's infirmary. They sound quite similar when they're talking. I just seen where they split up, and I didn't realise what one was which until a good 20 minutes later, where they go and find one of them, and it was like, oh. Then eventually, no, in fact, it's even later than that, because then they get in a lift, get stuck in the lift, the phone goes off, the dad talks to the main character, and I was like, oh, she was the main character. I thought it was the other one. I thought they'd done something really crazy, like they were going to kill off the one that I thought was the main character, and I was like, whoa, what a twist. But no, it was the friend, who was Kelly. Because I was like, was the main character called Kelly at the beginning? I don't know, maybe. I think she's called Amy. I'm going to check on IMDb. Main character is called Amy. I pulled it off, guys. I did it. For my next con, there were a lot of technical flaws in this movie. Like you see in all Asylum movies, like shots being repeated. You see there's green screening in this movie, and it's done really badly. It's got that kind of shape around the person that you see a lot when green screen's not been done well. It's got that, and it's really distracting and off-putting, especially because it's mostly in the scenes in Greenland where they're on a giant iceberg and everything's white. You basically got a plain white background and really distracting, lines around the people. For our next con, there's really egregious stock audio in this movie. So, a big shout out goes out to electricity.wav for a cable that's sparking in some water and it goes like pew, 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 pew. But it's like the exact same electricity sound you've heard in every movie. But the real star of this movie is crowdcheering.wav, which is I believe, from the sounds of it, 15 seconds of a crowd cheering, and that plays for 8 minutes at the opening of the movie as they're waiting for the ship to set sail. It's just like that over and over and over and over, and it's really noticeable. Also, every time they cut back, it starts at the beginning again. I think, at least I'm pretty certain it does. I'm not gonna go back and check. You can check when you watch Titanic 2. For the next con, the characters in this movie are really dumb. A lot of them are dumb. But I mentioned already standing on the collapsing iceberg. That's one of my favourite dumb moments in this. There are a lot of, the main character's heroic sacrifice. Well, main character, not her. Shane Van Dyke's heroic sacrifice in this movie is his plan for them to escape, so they eventually get into a diving locker, where the diving supplies are, and there's one wetsuit and one oxygen tank, so he gives it to the girl. And his plan is, you wait here to get rescued in this locker that we're in. I'll drown. So his plan is to drown. And they can revive me once we get out of the ship that's upside down and underwater. They'll revive me once I get out of the ship, and I'll be fine. And you're like, that's not really okay. It's not how that really works, mate. If you don't have enough oxygenated blood to your brain, you start getting brain damage really quickly. And it'll take quite a bit to swim back out the Titanic upside down. We never get explained how she does get out, outside of the fact her dad shows up and rescues her by diving in to save her. After the helicopter crashes in the sea. Yeah, the helicopter refuels at one point, then it runs out of fuel anyway and crashes into the sea. And you're like, what was the point of that? Also, why did you only mention, like the helicopter pilot only mentions we're running out of fuel when the fuel gauge is on the E? When it's all the way empty. He's like, we're running out of fuel. Oh man. It's a really dumb movie. It's fun though. It's a lot more fun than I've had in recent weeks. Before I move on from dumb characters, special shout out has to go to the infirmary people, so when they first get the signs of something bad's about to happen, okay? So they don't know about it, but they're sitting in the infirmary, they're having a bit of a chat about whether she still fancies Shane Van Dyke or not, because they used to be together and now they're not, and then they get together at the end of the movie, but then he dies. No! How tragic. Yeah, they're having that conversation. The phone rings, in the infirmary. She picks up and answers it, and it's like, oh, could one of you come up to the deck of the ship, please? And she goes, oh, sorry, but we're in a bit of an important conversation at the moment. And all I can think is, you work in the infirmary of a ship. If they're saying, could one of you come up to the deck, please? That probably means someone's sick and urgently needs help. Because they're asking you to go, not for the person to move. So that could be someone who's broken their neck or something. And you're like, whatever, I need to find out the hot goss with my girlfriend. What an unlikable character. For my next con, the movie feels kind of cynical. It's called Titanic 2 because the boat's called Titanic 2. And all I could think was, you're just trying to trick people into thinking there's a Titanic 2. Not I don't think anyone would fall for that. I don't think many people will buy this thinking it's a sequel to the James Cameron movie. But that's what you're trying to trick people with. I mean, Shane Van Dyke is most notable for making a lot of the mockbusters that the Asylum make. I believe he's worked on one of the Transmorphers, for example. It's not impossible that their intent is to trick people into thinking this is a sequel to Titanic. But it's kind of sleazy, It's kind of no one's going to buy that. And tying into that feeling a bit cynical, it feels a bit disrespectful as well, because real people died in the Titanic, and you're just kind of turning that into a popcorn disaster movie, You're like, Towering Inferno, they didn't go, well, 100 years ago, the Great Fire of London happened, so we're going to build another London, and then, oh no, it caught on fire. That isn't the plot of the Towering Inferno, is it? The movie Earthquake isn't 100 years ago. Los Angeles had an earthquake, and now, 100 years later, we've built a replica of Los Angeles, and it's going to have an earthquake. It just comes across as a bit ew, I don't know if I like that or not. For another con, there are plenty of plot holes in this movie. I didn't, deliberately dive too deep, because you could get plot holes super easy. But the one that really struck out to me and was really, really bad is they're told, turn around the ship, go back the way you came. Or no, they're told, to reverse their engines and go back the way they came. So, basically put the ship in reverse. What they actually, because you've got 15 minutes, okay? What actually happens is the ship turns round 180 degrees and is travelling forward back towards where it came from. Now, I don't know if you've ever been on a ship, But like, for example, I've been on quite a few ferries in my life. They take a long time to turn. Because you know what happens if you like spin the wheel like crazy? The whole ship tips. That like is in a lot of movies. That's in like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Ships are really easy to tip over. Well, they're not, because they're designed not to be. But you could, in theory, easily tip a ship over by turning it at too tight an angle. That is never addressed. The ship just, is going towards the UK, and then next scene we come back to it's going the other direction. And I feel like it would take more than 15 minutes to fully 180-degree turn a ship the size of the Titanic. I don't know that. I'm not like an expert on ships. But I believe it would take longer. Because it is a massive ship. Right? And you can't turn it at like a... You have to like slowly turn, otherwise everyone will end up crashing into one side as like the entire floor of the ship tips. Very strange. Speaking of very strange, there's just a random attacking man in this. So there's this one guy, and he just attacks people. So like they're getting people onto the lifeboats, and they're like, oh, women first. It's meant to be women and children, but they couldn't afford any children actors, I don't think. So it's like women first, women first. So all these women are getting in the elevator, and this guy's like, oh no, I've got to get in there. And the guy in the elevator, who's like the member of staff of the boat, punches him in the face. And then he runs in and kind of falls and tackles down one of the women. So, the lead woman. So, Shane Van Dyke picks him up and punches him in the face again. Then, in another scene, he tries to get into the lift, and he gets punched in the face again. And it's like, who is this man? He also gets in a fist fight with Shane Van Dyke. I'm like, who is this character? Why is he fighting everyone? What is this? Why was there a fight scene in Titanic 2? It's so weird. I don't know what's going on with it. It's just so weird. It's very confusing. So for an overall rating, I gave this movie 1 out of 10. Because it is a 1 out of 10. Even though I enjoyed it more than the other ones, it's a 1 out of 10. Do I think you should see it? Maybe. If you're having a bad movie night, it's a good movie for a bad movie night. Because it's quite fun. It's not well made. But the best thing about this movie is the shots of the Queen Mary. Oh, I never mentioned that. I'm going to bring this back up. But when the ship's leaving, so for the exterior shots of the ship, I was impressed they had any. They filmed the Queen Mary, which is like an old cruise liner. So it's kind of like the same kind of ship as the Titanic, Not the exact same model, but the same kind of idea. So you're like, oh, okay, that's quite good. We'll give you that for a low budget movie. There's some of the interiors are that as well. When they're so when the ship's leaving, they film all these extras like waving on the balcony, like bye, like the people out on the ground. People on the ground are like bye up at them, and what they do is they're filming the people on the balcony from the ground, and the camera moves along like the ship's moving the opposite direction, and it's so obvious it's the camera moving rather than the ship. It's hilarious. Like, also, the people standing on the moving ship, that's just started, are perfectly still. Not like any shakes, not like any swaying, nothing at all. They're just perfectly like, oh, goodbye. Then like a bunch of fireworks go off and some jets fly overhead. It's mental. I had to bring that point back up because I forgot about that, and it is really worth mentioning because it's really funny. I think as a bad movie, it's a good bad movie. It's probably... No, actually, Madhouse is the best bad movie so far. I love that movie. This is probably number 2. Ironic, given it's a Titanic 2. That'll do it for this week's episode. What am I watching today on Sunday, the 3rd of February? I'm watching Velvet Buzzsaw on Netflix, which is made by the same director as Nightcrawler, and also has Jake Gyllenhaal, and also has Rene Russo, so I'm quite excited about that. My favourite film of the week, I need to do that. My film of the week, kinda tricky. I might go for The Other Side of the Wind, even though I gave You Were Never Really Here. No, I'll go You Never Really Here. Yeah, You Were Never Really Here is my film of the week. It could have easily been Other Side of the Wind, though. Those two are quite close to each other. I really enjoyed both of them. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can leave a like. You can comment some more suggestions of films for me to watch, because I like reading those and hunting down a bunch of obscure DVDs. If you want to see all the stuff I do, you can subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Titanic 2, here I come.